There is a moment, brief, almost invisible, that happens within the first 90 seconds of every human encounter. A moment so fast, so instinctive, so deeply wired into the ancient architecture of the human brain that most people never even realize it is happening. And yet, in that razor-thin window of time, a decision is being made about you. Not because you're ready, not because of your achievements, not because of the car you drive or the clothes you wear or the title printed on your business card. A decision made purely on feeling, on energy, on presence, on something that cannot be faked, manufactured, or bought. And the people who understand this, truly understand it, move through the world differently. Doors open for them that remain closed for everyone else. Conversations flow toward them, like water finding its natural level. People feel drawn to them without quite being able to explain why. They are not necessarily the most attractive people in the room. They are not always the loudest or the most confident or the most successful. But there is something about them, something magnetic, something warm, something that makes you feel, in their presence, that you matter. Dale Carnegie spent his entire life studying these people. He watched them in boardrooms and on street corners. He analyzed them in moments of triumph and in moments of failure. He dissected their conversations, their habits, their instincts, their rituals. And after decades of observation, research, and teaching hundreds of thousands of students across the world, he arrived at a conclusion so simple it almost sounds foolish. The secret to making anyone like you, genuinely, deeply, lastingly like you, has almost nothing to do with you. Let that land. It has nothing to do with how impressive you are, nothing to do with how clever your words are, nothing to do with how well you present yourself or how perfectly you've crafted your first impression strategy. The secret, Carnegie discovered, is entirely about them, about the other person, about how you make them feel, about whether in your presence they feel seen, heard, valued, and understood. This is not a trick. This is not a manipulation tactic. This is a profound and ancient truth about human nature that most modern people have forgotten, buried under the noise of self-promotion, personal branding, and the relentless pressure to perform. Think about the last time you met someone and immediately felt at ease. Someone who made you feel within moments like you had known them for years. Someone whose company felt effortless, natural, almost like coming home. What was it about them? Chances are they were genuinely interested in you. They asked questions and actually listened to the answers. They remembered something small you said and reflected it back. They made eye contact not to intimidate, but to connect. They smiled, not the rehearsed, professional smile of someone working a room, but the real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes. Carnegie called this the most powerful force in human relationships. And he had a name for the fundamental human hunger that lies beneath all of it. He called it the deepest craving in human nature, the desire to feel important, not important in an arrogant sense, not important in a way that diminishes others, but important in the most basic, most human sense, the sense that your existence matters, that your faults have value, that the person standing across from you is genuinely glad you are there. Most people walk through life starved of this feeling. They go to work and feel invisible. They come home and feel unheard. They sit in rooms full of people and feel utterly, profoundly alone. And then, one day, they meet someone who sees them, really sees them, and in that moment something shifts, something softens, a wall comes down that they didn't even know they had built. That is the power Carnegie was talking about. That is the forgotten secret. And it begins, always, in those first 90 seconds. The secret to making anyone like you has nothing to do with you, and everything to do with how you make them feel. To understand how this works, truly works, beneath the surface, you have to go back to a time before self-help was an industry, before LinkedIn profiles and personal branding coaches and YouTube thumbnails promising to teach you charisma in 10 steps. You have to go back to a small town in Missouri, to a farm, to a boy who grew up poor, awkward, and desperate to be liked. Dale Carnegie was not born magnetic. He was born into struggle. His family had almost nothing. The farm flooded constantly. The poverty was real and grinding and visible, and young Dale, sensitive, observant, deeply aware of how the world looked at people who had less, grew up with a hunger that had nothing to do with food. He wanted to matter. He wanted to connect. He wanted to walk into a room and feel like he belonged there. Sound familiar? Most of us carry some version of that hunger. Most of us remember a moment, a classroom, a party, a job interview, a first date, where we desperately wanted someone to like us and had absolutely no idea how to make it happen, where we tried too hard, or said the wrong thing, or retreated into silence and walked away feeling like we had failed some invisible test. Carnegie failed those tests too, many times. But instead of giving up, he started paying attention. He watched people who were naturally liked, effortlessly, universally liked, and he reverse engineered what they were doing. He read everything he could find on psychology, human behavior, philosophy. He studied historical figures. He interviewed successful businessmen, politicians, performers. He practiced what he learned in real conversations, in real rooms, with real consequences. And slowly, not overnight, not magically, but through genuine and disciplined effort, he transformed, not into a different person, into a fuller version of himself, a version who understood the invisible rules of human connection and chose deliberately and consistently to honor them. The first rule he discovered was this: become genuinely interested in other people, not strategically interested, not performatively interested, not interested in the way a salesman is interested in a prospect or a networker is interested in a contact, but genuinely, curiously, authentically interested in the inner world of the human being standing in front of you. This sounds obvious. It sounds almost too simple to be the foundation of a philosophy that changed millions of lives. But here is the thing about obvious truths: they are rarely practiced. Watch how most people behave in conversation. Watch how quickly they redirect the topic back to themselves. Watch how they half listen, waiting for their turn to speak. Watch how their eyes drift when someone else is talking. Watch how they ask questions not because they want to know the answer, but because asking a question makes them appear interested. Carnegie watched all of this, and he understood the genuine interest, the real thing, the kind that makes another person feel truly seen, is one of the rarest gifts one human being can offer another. He told the story of a man named Charles Eliot, president of Harvard University for 40 years, one of the most respected academic leaders in American history, and according to everyone who ever met him, one of the warmest, most genuinely engaging conversationalists they had ever encountered. His secret? When Charles Eliot spoke with you, he gave you his complete and total attention, not the polite performance of attention, not the divided, distracted, half-present attention that passes for listening in most social situations. His complete attention, as if in that moment you were the most interesting and important person in the world, because to him, in that moment, you were. That is not a technique. That is a philosophy, a choice about how to treat people, a decision made quietly and consistently to honor the humanity in everyone you encounter. Carnegie built his entire system on this foundation. He understood that before any skill matters, before your words, your humor, your confidence, your body language, the other person must first feel something from you. They must feel your attention, your warmth, your genuine curiosity about who they are and what they care about. And here is the psychology beneath this principle that Carnegie grasped long before modern neuroscience could confirm it. The human brain is wired to detect authenticity. It is wired to sense almost instantly whether the interest being shown is real or performed, whether the smile is genuine or manufactured, whether the person across from you actually wants to be there or is simply going through the social motions. And when the brain detects genuine interest, real warmth, real attention, real curiosity, it responds with something powerful, something chemical, something that bypasses logic and judgment and goes straight to the emotional core. It responds with trust, not trust that is earned over months or years, but a first layer of trust, a primal, instinctive opening, a sense that this person is safe, that this person sees me, that I want to be around this person again. All of that in 90 seconds, sometimes less. Genuine interest in another person is one of the rarest gifts one human being can offer another, and the most powerful. There is experiment that psychologists have repeated in different forms across different decades and different cultures, and the result is always the same. Take two strangers, seat them across from each other, give one of them a simple instruction. Ask questions and genuinely listen to the answers. Give the other no instruction at all. After 10 minutes, ask the second person how they feel about the first. Almost universally, the answer is some version of the same thing. They seem really interesting. There is something about them I like. I felt comfortable almost immediately. I would like to talk to them again. Now, here's the remarkable part. The first person, the one who asked questions and listened, said almost nothing about themselves. They shared no impressive stories. They displayed no remarkable wit. They performed no charisma technique lifted from a self help book. They simply made the other person feel heard. And that was enough. This is what Carnegie understood at a cellular level. This is what he taught in every classroom, wrote into every page, repeated in every lecture until it became not just a lesson, but a living truth that his students could feel in their own experiences. People are not primarily looking for someone impressive. They are looking for someone present, someone who makes the noise of the world go quiet for a moment, someone who looks at them, not past them, not at their phone while nodding absently, but at them, with real eyes, with real attention, with the unmistakable signal that says, "You matter to me right now." But Carnegie did not stop at genuine interest. He went deeper. He identified specific, learnable behaviors that transform genuine interest into magnetic connection. Behaviors so precise and so powerful that when practiced consistently, they can shift the entire energy of a conversation within moments. The first is the smile. Not a polite smile, not a professional smile, not the kind smiley ready on your face before walking into a room because you know you are supposed to look approachable. The real smile. The one Carnegie described as worth more than any words you could speak. He told the story of a department store manager in New York who transformed his failing staff simply by instructing them to smile genuinely at every customer. Not a uniform, trained corporate smile, a real one, the kind that communicates warmth without a single syllable. Sales increased, customer complaints dropped, staff morale rose. The entire atmosphere of the store shifted because of something that costs nothing, takes less than a second, and yet communicates more than most people manage in an entire conversation. Carnegie wrote that a smile says, "I am glad to see you. I like you. Your presence makes me happy." And the human brain, that ancient instinct-driven, emotionally hungry human brain, responds to that signal the way a plant responds to sunlight. It opens. The second behavior is the name. Carnegie considered this so important that he dedicated an entire chapter to it. He called a person's name the sweetest and most important sound in any language, not because of the word itself, but because of what hearing your own name communicates. It communicates that you were remembered, that you mattered enough to be stored, that the person across from you did not simply pass through your presence and move on. They carried something of you with them. Think about how you feel when someone remembers your name in a context where they had no obligation to. A barista, a colleague from another department, someone you met briefly at an event months ago. The small but unmistakable warmth that rises in your chest when they say your name with genuine recognition. That warmth is not trivial. That warmth is the beginning of connection. Carnegie studied Andrew Carnegie, no relation, one of the wealthiest and most influential industrialists in American history. And one of Andrew Carnegie's most celebrated leadership qualities was his ability to remember names. Hundreds of them. Thousands. The names of workers on the factory floor. The names of their wives. The names of their children. People did not just work for Andrew Carnegie. They were loyal to him. Deeply, personally loyal. Because he made them feel, through the simple act of remembering their name, that they were not invisible. That is not a small thing. In a world that constantly makes people feel like numbers, like units of productivity, like faces in a crowd, like interchangeable parts in a machine, the act of remembering someone's name is quietly revolutionary. It says, "You are not replaceable to me. You are specific. You are real. You are someone I chose to hold in my memory." And then there is the third behavior, the one that Carnegie considered perhaps the most underused and most powerful of all: listening, not waiting to speak, not planning your next sentence while the other person is still forming theirs, not listening with the surface of your attention while your mind races ahead to your own agenda. Listening with your whole self. Carnegie told the story of a dinner party where he spent an entire evening asking questions and listening, truly listening, to a botanist he had just met. Hours passed. The conversation flowed entirely in one direction. Carnegie spoke very little about himself. At the end of the evening, the botanist told their host that Carnegie was the most interesting conversationalist he had ever met. Carnegie had barely spoken, but the botanist had spoken freely, fully, about the things he loved most, and in doing so, he had felt something rare and precious. He had felt understood. People are not looking for someone impressive. They are looking for someone present, someone who makes them feel understood. There is a moment in everything meaningful conversation where something shifts, where the polite, surface level exchange of pleasantries gives way to something deeper, something more honest, something that feels less like two people performing social roles and more like two human beings actually meeting each other. Most people wait for this moment to happen by accident. Carnegie taught that you can create it deliberately, consistently, with the right understanding of what human beings most deeply need from one another. And what they need, beneath all the noise, beneath all the performance, beneath all the carefully constructed social armor that most of us wear every day, is to be understood without being judged. This is the emotional core of Carnegie's philosophy. This is the insight that separates genuine connection from mere likability. This is the difference between someone thinking you are pleasant company and someone feeling, in the deepest part of themselves, that you are someone they can trust. Carnegie called it seeing the world from the other person's point of view. He did not mean this as a rhetorical device. He did not mean pretending to agree with people to make them feel good. He meant something far more demanding and far more powerful. He meant the genuine, disciplined, humble act of stepping outside your own perspective, your own assumptions, your own judgments, your own emotional reactions, and trying with real effort and real curiosity to understand why another person thinks, feels, and behaves the way they do. This is extraordinarily difficult because the default setting of the human mind is not curiosity. It is judgment. We see someone behave in a way we do not understand and we label them difficult, irrational, wrong. We dismiss the complexity of their inner world with a single convenient word and move on. Carnegie asked his students to resist this impulse, to pause before judging, to ask, instead, what is driving this person? What do they want? What are they afraid of? What experience shaped the way they see the situation? He drew on the wisdom of the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, who observed that every person takes the limits of their own vision for the limits of the world. Most conflicts in relationships, in workplaces, in families, in negotiations are not really conflicts of values. They are conflicts of perspective. Two people looking at the same reality from different angles, and each convinced that their angle is the only valid one. The person who can step back from their own angle, even momentarily, even imperfectly, and genuinely try to see through another person's eyes, possesses a social power that almost no one else in the room has. Carnegie illustrated this with one of his most memorable stories. A man named Gerald Wynne was struggling with a difficult neighbor. The neighbor's dog kept destroying Wynne's garden. Complaints had been made. Arguments had followed. The relationship had deteriorated into cold hostility. Then Wynne tried something different. Instead of approaching the neighbor with another complaint, he approached him with a question. He asked about the dog. He showed genuine curiosity about the animal the neighbor clearly loved. He acknowledged the neighbor's attachment, before raising his own concern. The entire dynamic shifted, not because the problem disappeared, but because the neighbor felt, for the first time in their conflict, that Win was not his enemy, that Win saw him as a person rather than an obstacle. Within days, the problem was resolved, not through force or confrontation or the escalating cycle of complaint and resistance, but through the simple disarming power of genuine empathy. This is what Carnegie meant when he said that you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming genuinely interested in other people than you can in 2 years, trying to get other people interested in you. The arithmetic of human connection does not work the way most people assume. Most people believe that to be liked, you must be impressive, you must be entertaining, you must be interesting, you must give people reasons to admire you. Carnegie turned this completely upside down. He understood that what people most respond to is not being impressed, it is being valued. It is the experience of being with someone who makes them feel more alive, more interesting, more worthy, simply by the quality of their attention. And here is where his philosophy becomes genuinely profound, because Carnegie was not just teaching a set of social techniques, he was teaching a way of seeing people, a way that starts from a fundamental belief in the value and dignity of every human being you encounter, a belief that every person, regardless of their status, their appearance, their level of success, their social position, carries within them a story worth hearing, a perspective worth understanding, a humanity worth honoring. This belief is not naive. It is not weakness. It is the foundation of every great leader, every beloved mentor, every person who has ever walked through a room and left every person in it feeling better for having been there. It is the quality that made Abraham Lincoln, whom Carnegie studied deeply and admired profoundly, one of the most emotionally intelligent leaders in human history, a man who could sit with his enemies without anger, who could hear criticism without crumbling, who could hold the weight of a nation's suffering and still find warmth for every individual human being who crossed his path. Lincoln did not perform empathy. He practiced it daily, deliberately, as a discipline and a choice. And Carnegie believed, with the conviction of a man who had tested this truth across thousands of conversations and hundreds of thousands of students, that this same capacity lives in every one of us, waiting to be chosen, waiting to be practiced, waiting to transform every ordinary encounter into something that neither person will quite forget. What people most respond to is not being impressed. It is being valued, seen, and understood by someone who chose to truly pay attention. Everything we have explored, the genuine interest, the real smile, the remembered name, the quality of listening, the discipline of empathy, the courage to see the world through another person's eyes. All of it leads here to the final truth, the deepest layer, the one that Carnegie saved for last, not because it was an afterthought, but because it could only be understood after everything else had been absorbed, after the student had sat with the simpler lessons long enough to feel their weight and recognize their limits. Because here is what Carnegie knew that most people who study his work never fully grasp. The techniques are not the point. The smile is not a technique. The name is not a technique. The listening, the empathy, the genuine curiosity, none of it works if it remains at the level of strategy. None of it lands if the person across from you can sense, even faintly, that it is being deployed rather than felt. And people always sense it. That ancient instinct-driven brain that we talked about at the very beginning of this story, the one that makes its decision about you within 90 seconds, is not fooled by performance. It has been detecting the difference between genuine and counterfeit human warmth for 200,000 years. It is very, very good at its job. So the final lesson Carnegie taught was not a behavior. It was a transformation of the way you see people. He called it the most important thing he ever learned about human nature. And he framed it not as a strategy for success, but as a fundamental shift in identity, a decision about the kind of person you choose to be in the world. He asked his students to consider this. Every single person you will ever meet believes, in the deepest and most unexamined part of themselves, that they are the central character of the story, not out of arrogance, not out of selfishness, but because that is the only perspective any of us has ever had access to. We live inside our own experience. We feel our own pain most acutely. We understand our own motivations most clearly. We care about our own dreams most passionately. This is not a flaw. It is simply the human condition. And Carnegie's insight was this: if you want to connect with people at the deepest level, you must honor this truth rather than fight it. You must enter their world rather than drag them into yours. Not occasionally, not when it is convenient, not when you want something from them. Always, as a practice, as a discipline, as a quiet, daily, invisible commitment to treating every human being you encounter as though their inner world is as rich, as complex, and as worthy of attention as your own. Because it is. This is the forgotten secret, not a 90-second trick, not a first impression formula, but a philosophy of human dignity lived out in the smallest, most ordinary moments of daily life. A philosophy that says, before I try to be interesting, let me be interested. Before I try to be heard, let me listen. Before I try to be understood, let me understand. Carnegie lived this philosophy until the end of his life, and the people who knew him truly knew him, not as a famous author or a celebrated teacher, but as a human being in a room, said the same thing again and again. When you were with Dale Carnegie, you felt like the most important person in the world. Not because he performed that feeling, but because he genuinely believed it about you. He genuinely believed that you, whoever you were, wherever you came from, whatever you had or had not achieved, had something in you worth knowing, worth honoring, worth his complete and undivided attention. And that belief, communicated silently through every gesture and every word and every quality of presence he brought to an encounter, was felt immediately, within 90 seconds, sometimes less. This is the inheritance he left us, not the list of rules to memorize or a set of tactics to deploy at the next networking event, but a way of moving through the world that starts from a single radical, quietly revolutionary premise: that people matter, all of them, everyone. The tired colleague in the elevator, the frustrated customer on the phone, the stranger at the party who feels invisible, the person across the table who believes, in some quiet corner of their heart, that no one truly sees them. You can see them. You can choose, in any moment, in any encounter, to be the person who makes someone else feel, even briefly, even imperfectly, that they are not invisible, that they are not interchangeable, that they are not just a face in a crowd, that they are known. That is not a 90-second technique. That is a life's work. Carnegie's life work. And now, if you choose it, yours. The forgotten secret was never really forgotten. It was simply waiting, patiently, quietly, with the kind of dignity it deserves, for someone to choose to remember it. For someone exactly like you. The forgotten secret was never really forgotten. It was simply waiting for someone with the courage and the heart to choose to live it.